Welcome back, everyone. Another Thursday night episode of Roleplaying Unlimited Out of Character. With me, as always, my compatriot Evil Dawn as Celestial, the Asmar Paladin. Say hello to everybody.
How's it going?
Doing pretty good, pretty good. Hope you're all doing well as well. And we're going to jump into the events of this most recent session. It was, spoiler alert, the session that finally saw the transition from Baldur's Gate into Avernus. Long-awaited moment for all the players, and myself included.
And my dice, as a spoiler, have been as wonderful as ever.
Yeah, poor Dawn. I know with Wendy's departure from Roleplaying Unlimited after the last campaign, somebody definitely had to draw the short straw with the bad dice, and undoubtedly it was you.
Making Celestial like the worst paladin in the world.
Which is
no, he's not that bad.
It's doubly unfortunate because your whole intent with the character was to show how powerful and great the paladin class could be, and so far it's just like, man, maybe there is something to the naysayers.
As long as I'm not playing a ranger.
Oh, goodness. I mean, Kyla's playing Hezra, and she's kicking butt with her, especially with that extended reach that the bugbear has, but I digress.
Right. So what's on our agenda today?
Well, we see here on the central virtual tabletop the combat that ended off the previous session. Your characters were heading along the coastway as seen on the previous map, and you passed what appeared to be a friendly farmer who waved hello, and after a brief exchange of pleasantries, the farmer dropped its Alter Self spell, revealing itself as a Cambion devil, an infernal offspring of a succubus or incubus, and a humankind of some sort. And this particular Cambion had hired 3 mercenaries to assist him in retrieving the golden shield from Celestial. This particular Cambion is a member of the Knights of the Shield, and this is the first encounter that we would have with this individual.
Well, we didn't even know that there's an actual organization called the Knights of the Shield, so we'll have to try to keep that, out of game. Yeah, it was an interesting fight. Especially the fact that I had advantage and my horse actually did better than I did in combat.
Very true, very true. Having some brief audio issues on your end there, brother. Cutting in and out, but for the most part I made you out there. As usual, the map that we are looking at here is the aftermath of the combat. So, of course, everybody with a red health bar has a red X drawn through their token, and everybody with a green health bar is standing and alive and well, which is, of course, on both sides of the table, what you want to see at the end of any combat.
And the Cambion demon fled.
Yes, he did. The veterans were surrounded here, as we can see. This was also the debut combat for Celestial's Celestial Steed here. And the veterans spread themselves out from the get-go. They spread 2 to this side of the wagon, and one of them is lying dead here in the high grass. And, I mean, as Justin pointed out, as this combat was beginning, so there's 4 of them and there's 8 of us, and they think they're ambushing us? I mean, what the hell?
And that's the whole thing too. Well, they did manage to get rid of, last week, they did manage to get rid of one of our players. They got rid of Hezra for temporarily, sending her down to the plains.
Correct, yeah, we used the Cambion's plane shift ability to plot device Hezra away for a few games while Kyla is tending to some real-life first stuff. And then when she comes back to the group, As I told everybody at the time, I'll give you one guess as to where her character has been plane shifted to. So there's all kinds of tricky ways and ingenious ways you can use to remove a character, to kill a character, to bring back a character who's been killed, and this was a particularly useful one because it's not often in a campaign, especially ones that I run, that I know the party is imminently bound for another plane of existence, and banishing a character for a few games is actually a great way to get rid of them.
And it also makes it a great plot device for us to go and try to locate her.
Of course, assuming you even know that she's in Avernus. I mean, she could potentially be on Nirvana, in the Abyss, Elysium, any number of the planes, but out of game, of course, we know that she's here on Avernus, and when Kyla returns, hey, look at that, we found Hezra. Just where that's going to be depends on where we are, of course. Let me
Right.
consult my notes here. Yeah, so the Cambion, after the veterans were killed, it promptly turned tail and fled. We had Kalidor and Nadir both focus firing on this guy from range with magical energy, and Kalidor kept hitting me with lightning, which fortunately I was making the saves for the most part, and I had resistance against, which I kept telling him. I don't know if it was going in one ear out the other, or if he was just, for whatever reason, dead set on using that spell. I know he wasn't tapped on magic, because keep in mind you guys have been traveling for 2 days now. You've long rested. You're at full potential.
I think it was just because of the fact that he had the spell. It was a concentration spell. I think he was trying to use that for all it's worth.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was surprised, honestly, that he didn't bring in the usual spiritual weapon and then just kind of send that thing soaring through the sky. And we see here on the regional map again, the destination after our 11-game sojourn in Baldur's Gate. We then had a 5-day trek to Candlekeep here, the center. It's basically a giant library in Forgotten Realms, if there's any information to be found. Usually it can be found here, assuming you know which section to look.
And, you know, our characters, you know, dusty, dirty, and none of us knew that we needed to bring a gift. And it's a good thing our NPC was on the ball with that.
Yes, indeed. I was cringing a bit inside as your characters just kind of walked right past the Van Thamper library, which, I mean, you did have some brief interactions when I think it was your character actually who said, I bet the key is hidden inside of one of the books, and you guys just started knocking bookcases down, and hey, sure enough, we actually found the key.
And I didn't even think that Candlekeep was, you know, basically just a huge library, and none of us knew that a book was required as entrance for it. But then again, none of us have explored Candlekeep.
Yeah, and some of the characters knew that a book would be required, but I don't think anybody knew that you would be going to Candlekeep, of course, until just this last session. And by then, you had already liquidated the spell books that you had come across throughout the campaign. Any of those would have sufficed for entry. Of course, the specific black bound book Apocalypto detailing events of the end times that Grulok was rather quick to just liquidate for the 50 gold would have been worth considerably more here in Candlekeep, but c'est la vie.
Right. And that's the thing too, is we can't just keep carrying tons and tons of stuff hoping that the next location we go to there'd be some value. But you know what? We're also, I mean, again, to skip ahead a little bit, we're in hell, out of game. We knew we were going to hell. The need for coins in hell, probably not a big issue.
Not to mention, you just literally had your party bag of holding stolen the last session.
And Grulok just trying to negotiate with everybody for another bag of holding. It's like the bag of holding is not the end-all, be-all magic item.
Yeah, I mean, we actually found an Archmage who was willing to part ways with his bag of holding for half cost. But the best James could come up with was, I think, 40% of even that. Archmage was just no, no, thank you. And the reason we actually encountered an Archmage inside Candlekeep, skipping ahead to Fallister Fisk, he brought a rare book of Kalashite recipes with him, which was used as the entry fee for Candlekeep. Your characters entered. As you were starting to point out, your characters were dirty, you were grimy, you had been living off trail rations for 5-6 days. So getting a fresh meal was of utmost priority. Getting your clothes laundered and your armor cleaned was definitely a priority for Selephiel, and that's what took you to this particular shop.
Right. And, it's great as how we all role played our characters, where, um, Grulak, his first thought was, hey, I'm going to go sell all this junk that we just picked up. And Nadir going, you know what, I'm the smooth tongued one. I should go as well
Yeah.
to hopefully get better prices. Um, and then myself, the paladin has to keep up an appearance and plate armor plus, laundering and getting himself cleaned up from a road trip. Um, the term for cleanliness is next to godliness. Well, when you're a paladin, you try to get as close to godliness as possible.
Oh, absolutely.
And that brings us to our next little encounter and how my dice betrayed me again.
Yes, indeed. It was, I will fully admit, downright comical, slapstick. It was definitely Austin Powers, if even you want to make the stretch to the old school James Bond, how the villains just always happen to be in the right location. James Bond is going out to a dinner at a restaurant, and the villain just happens to be there because he's been following him. And such was the case in this experience as well, as the Cambion who had retreated earlier made a reappearance. After it flew away, it teleported back to Baldur's Gate, communicated with its Knights of the Shield compatriots, and we may see more of them again, we may not, considering your characters are in Avernus. How much do they want this shield? Are they going to track you into the Nine Hells to get it back? Only time will tell. We're definitely exploring a little out of game in that respect as well, but just to trace the path of the Cambion back to Baldur's Gate, communicate, no, we need the shield. You saw the shield, you were close to the shield, you go back, you get that damn shield. Okay. Teleports to Candlekeep, they know where you're going. Conveniently enough, because due to the comical and slapstick nature of the encounter I was creating. And I thought that the encounter would just end there in the shop, that the Cambion would reveal itself in its attempt to try to steal your shield, and that would be the end of it. You would fight it off, you would slay it, and that is not what ended up happening at all. Why don't you say what happened?
So I was supposed to roll an insight check. And again, my dice rolled terrible. So it's like, well, you hand over your armor, you hand over the shield to the store owner, and I'm waiting for it. And being the guardian of the shield, I'm watching the whole thing, and I'm watching this whole thing play out. And then all of a sudden, he grabs the shield and runs out the back door. And I'm like, wait, what? Why is he running out the back door with my shield? So I go give chase. I have a telepathic connection with the horse, so the horse is giving chase.
Right.
And to find out that the shopkeeper is actually the demon or the devil. And this devil starts flying with my shield, and I have no way to get it. So I jump on my horse and try following it to where it's going.
Yeah.
That's when an archmage from there sees this devil flying with a shield above the town and casts a disintegrate spell on it. And so, needless to say, it disintegrated. The shield drops, falls through the ceiling of the merchant that Grulak and Nadir are visiting.
Right. And that's exactly how the slapstick scene ended, because considering what happened last game is my immediate mindset coming into this encounter. I know the Cambion is going to make a return because it says so in the module. The Cambion is only encountered on the road if the party has the shield. You may have chosen not to take the shield, you may have chosen to give it away. try to destroy it, try to hide it somewhere, any number of times up to this point while you're traveling on the road. So only if you have the shield does this Cambion and the 3 veterans show up to engage you in combat. And if the Cambion is injured to a sufficient degree and is able to get away, it will then encounter you a second time in Candlekeep. So I knew this was coming up as soon as the Cambion got away, and I just thought, let's do something a little comical with this, thinking that you would just be able to finish it off there in the shop. And instead you rolled a 6 on your insight check. The Cambion now has possession of the artifact shield of Gargoth, and it just takes off out the back door. So of course now I'm just thinking, going back, my mindset into this is, we just ended the last session with your characters nonchalantly strolling across the bridge and paying your 3 copper toll to get past. And in that process, Grulok was robbed of the party's bag of holding and 265 gold pieces. Here we are at the beginning of the next session, and your character's literally just going to the laundromat trying to get clean before you present yourself to this scholar. And because of another poor die roll, now the party's going to lose the artifact shield? No. Something's going to happen here. We're going to resolve this, and we're going to have some fun with it.
Right. Candlekeep is way too well protected to let something like that happen.
Yes, indeed. As turned out to be the case, the Archmage spotted the devil cackling as it was flying through the sky, carrying the shield. Instant disintegrate spell. The devil is no more. The shield goes crashing through the ceiling of the mercantile where Grulok and Nadir are conducting their business. And just as Selephiel is riding around the corner on his steed giving chase because he's watching this whole thing take place. And that's how we're introduced to the Archmage, who is here basically as a policeman. He's investigating the matter. He saw a devil flying above, so his attention is, of course, instantly alerted. And that's how he comes to encounter your group. And Grulok, as you were pointing out, immediately latches onto. You got a bag of holding? How much? I'll buy it.
Right. And then also, I was very surprised and relieved that the shopkeeper didn't ask us to pay for the ceiling.
Yeah, he was a bit too in shock to even approach that subject, and thankfully your characters kept the ball rolling long enough that I didn't really see any point in interjecting that. We've had enough little side quests and detours along the way just to get to this point. It was like, alright, the shopkeep's got a hole in his ceiling. I mean, what better? Finale to the whole slapstick scene.
Yep. And then afterwards, I decide I'm going to go back to that shop, pick up my plate armor, to get it tended somewhere else, and to give a tongue lashing to the proprietor for allowing that to happen, to find out that the proprietor was murdered by the devil, and the devil took his form-ish, because, the alter self spell can't perfectly duplicate anybody, but how are we to know who he was?
Yeah, I mean, the Cambion's just making a close approximation, just in case somebody who actually knows the shopkeep wanders by, but of course that wasn't part of the scene at all. It was just, let's encounter this Cambion again, and let's resolve this so that that's not lingering out there as a loose plot thread. And of course, your character now back in possession of the shield. Everybody gets a meal at the local pub called the Hearth, and then you proceed on to Silvira's laboratory, where this tiefling who's got a closet familiar, and it's got a very demonic look to it. So Selephiel's the hair's instantly standing up on the back of his neck.
Yep, and it's like, we're gonna deal with this now. It's like, and everybody points out, yeah, but we have Nadir, who's also a tiefling. It's like,
right.
But we know Nadir. We've traveled with Nadir. This is something completely different, especially with the fact that we've been fighting imps for the first couple levels, and now we see an imp-like creature. Yes, it's a quastet, but an imp-like creature. Yeah, my character was just a little on edge.
Oh, for sure. which I love that we had a little in-game dialogue about it. She called out the elephant in the room. Oh, is there an issue with this? Oh, it's harmless. I'm harmless. I'm just a scholar. I'm the reason why you've been in contact with this agent here. I've been investigating Thavius Krieg for over a year now. I always knew there was something shady about him, and I sent my guy here to investigate him. And your characters became entangled in all of her dealings as she sees it. And now you've come to her with the puzzle box that she's been seeking, and she manages to get it open.
We also run into an otter that talks, and people were like, "What is this going on?" And it was my character who had to point out, "Look at the makeup of our group. We don't have a single human in our group. You know, angels and drow and bugbears and half ogres or half orcs, and we're a walking menagerie of weirdness ourselves."
Yeah, it's definitely a different age in D&D where you used to have. I don't know why. I can't really ever explain why, but just it always seemed like if you had a 5-player group, 3 of them were humans, and then the other 2 were playing an elf and a dwarf, or a dwarf and a halfling, or some other kind of demi-human to even go back to the 2E terminologies.
Well, let's look at it this way. When in previous games, when you played a human, you got a couple of really good advantages. You got like an extra feat or extra skills or etc. and so on. And then some of the other races that you would play would have a level penalty because they're more powerful. They have more abilities.
Right.
Now in 5e, all the demo humans are really good, and humans get +1 in all stats. And if you're using pre-generated stats, it usually pops out a lot of odd numbers, but a +1 in most stats isn't going to do anything unless you rolled all odd numbers in your ability scores.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to hold those attributes pretty highly in the overall scheme of things because that's where you get your attribute modifiers from. That's what influences your skills, your attack bonuses, your AC, pretty much everything else that is your character.
Right, but just a +1 so you're getting 6 +1, so you're getting +6 total to 1 to all of your abilities. Or if you use the optional rule, you could get a +1 in 2 abilities, and then a feat.
Or a feat. I think for most people, that's the drawing point for humans in 5e are the optional feats, which I think is exactly the reason we don't have any humans in this group. Because for those who I don't know that it's come up at any point before now on the in the live streaming, but one thing that I have banned in this campaign are feats and multiclassing, which in truth are optional additions. Most groups tend to use them just as kind of a standard part of the mechanics. In truth, I do as well. 99% of the time, multiclassing, the feats, they're completely on the table. This one time, I just was interested in seeing characters stick with their first class, carrying that through to level 13, and using their attribute modifiers instead of the feats. Because I find even though feats are cool and all, there's, like maybe 25 of them total, and every campaign uses the same 3 or 4 feats. You got a crossbow? Okay, I'm taking crossbow expert. You need this? Okay, I'm going to take the 2-weapon great master.
Right. If you're a spellcaster, you're taking either spell sniper or magic initiate.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
You're getting an extra couple cantrips and an extra first level spell.
Yeah, which are great additions. I just feel like been there, done that. Let's see what 5e looks like without those optional additions, and throw those extra points in intelligence, those extra points in strength, dexterity, what have you, and let's see how it measures up in that context.
And well, as you know, I mean, let's see. When it comes to level 13, we are going to get 4, 8, and 12. Those are where we're going to get our +2s.
Yeah.
So we're going to get a total of +6 in additional attributes. Most people will max out their main attribute, so that's going to go up to 20. Especially if
Yeah.
they started at 16, so it'll be to 18. But again, like Grulak started with an 18 because of his +2 strength from his race, and then moving that up to 20 as of level 4, there's nowhere to go. So, and I doubt a lot of these guys are going to start putting points in intelligence. I mean,
I gotta
they're
hand
just
it to Jim. I mean, look at his character sheet here. I'm publicly displaying his character sheet for everybody. The world can see him bare. I gotta hand it to him, given the pre-generated stats and the racial bonuses that he gets for being a half orc. Look at where he put his numbers. Like, there's nothing really min maxed, and even the dexterity only attained 17 at level 4.
mhm.
I'm always interested in his character sheets. He's got some interesting additions, and his characters just always had that extra spice to the party. But I digress. Back to the laboratory in Candlekeep.
Wait, where does it say dumb on his character sheet actually?
It's not on his character sheet. It's actually in the. Oh man, where's that? Characters, flaws and dark secret. Right there. D-U-M, dumb. And then, of course, there's Calidor's brilliant, the tyrant who rolls my land will stop at nothing to see me killed, and in fact did not stop at anything. In fact, they were both killed.
And I mean, if you look at it though, we have 3 or 4 characters that have an 8 intelligence.
It's an astounding number. I think it's 4 because I think, if I recall correctly, it's 24 points of intelligence between 4 characters. Or no, it's 32. 32 between 4
Okay.
characters.
Yep. So I have an 8 intelligence. He has an 8 intelligence. Grulak has an 8 intelligence. And it's like, I'm the only one. Yes, I'm not playing my character incredibly book smart and such like that. You know, I'm going off of more gut instincts because of his wisdom and everything.
Yeah.
But I'm not playing him stupid. You know, it's like the other two just play their characters as they're stupid. And it's like, no, you're a little below average, but you know.
That's the brilliance of the different perspectives as they see the numbers. Like, everybody's going to play their character a little different, even with the same set of stats. Because even with all the options they give you in any role-playing game, there's still only so many options you can play. And if you've been playing the same system for years on end, you've explored every option there is. So at that point, you're really digging into the minutia and peeking behind the curtain and just... I'm reinventing the wheel here as far as how I'm playing my character. This stat actually means this, and this actually means this, and ultimately it's just about how I'm presenting the character.
Well, do you remember back, I think it was in 3.30 or 3.5 at one point, where each stat had 2 stats to it?
Oh yeah, that was 2nd edition actually, I believe, where strength
Oh,
was
that's right.
divided
It would
into
have been, yeah.
stamina and power. I think it was. I loved that part about 2E as well, because back then I was extremely rules heavy. The more rules, the better, and I think that was Skills and Powers, or Feats and Options was the name of the book, and that completely changed D&D for me when I obtained that book back in 97, 98 or whatever, because all the options that provided for 2E definitely added a whole lot of layers to the game that were enjoyable.
Right, so you could have made your character, you know, book stupid and street smart, or vice versa, or you could have kept it balanced. You know, you could have kept it, you know, and I believe what it was is that you had that same stat in each, but you could raise one and lower the other.
Yeah, there was a 2-point differential, as I recall. Like, if your strength was a 16, you could have a power of 18, but a stamina of 14 to show that you were just all muscle, but you were not going to be the pack mule of the party. You were like, I can do the 30-yard dash, but don't expect me to run the marathon.
Exactly, and then same thing with dexterity. It had, you know, it's 2 different things. One affected your armor class, but one affected eye-hand coordination.
Exactly. Because, I mean, even with your 6 attributes and your alignment, which I think are basically the core of your character. Those 7 things in totality, it's very difficult to create an entire concept just off of those 7 things. But that's the beauty of role-playing games and role players in general, is their ability to see those 6 numbers and those 2 words, be it chaotic good, lawful evil, whatever, and create an entire character out of it.
You know, and it does take a lot. I mean, because and to keep that character design and keep the backstory in your mind throughout the entire show, not the entire show, but the entire game, so that you're doing things that your character would do, and also finding loopholes for things that make your character do stuff that technically your character wouldn't do, but you need to keep the game moving forward.
Or sometimes, yeah, I mean, it comes with its positives and its negatives, but sometimes playing your character can bring the campaign itself to a screeching halt, while also still developing an entirely new plot of the character and the player characters themselves. I mean, I think every GM's crowning moments when they've set the scene sufficiently that they find they don't have to talk anymore. And the players are literally just acting the scene among themselves, and occasionally they might look over to the GM and, hey, so remind me about this, or can you give me a little extra detail about this? But by that point, you've got 5, 6 players that are completely inventing the scene, and you're just kind of glowing in that triumph. Because for me, that's where I take the particular achievement in.
Very true. So back to going to hell, so to speak.
We are rapidly approaching that point. We have encountered the scholar Archmage Sylvira. She's an Archmage in her own right. And she has properly deciphered the way to crack open this infernal puzzle box. And within, we discover the infernal contract between the former High Overseer of Elturel, Thavius Krieg, and the ruler of Avernus, the Archdevil Zariel. And in short, the contract basically stipulates that after a 50-year period, Zariel will gain complete control of Elturel, dragging it down into the Nine Hells, and every citizen who is attached to the city will have sworn vows to protect the city, defend the city, your pledge of allegiance, so to speak. And that allegiance is actually a hidden code that makes you, in turn, obligatory to the terms of the pact. So when the devil brings Elturel down into the Nine Hells, she technically has control of all of these citizens that are in the city. And that we learn is exactly what has happened. That is why Elturel was gone. That's why the nobles in Baldur's Gate are conspiring to make the same thing happen up there. And that's what your characters just narrowly averted without entirely knowing it.
And we also learned from the Archmage about a little bit of the history of the shield, about Grogoth, the devil that's imprisoned in the shield, and it has a tendency, being an artifact type shield, that it causes mayhem and destruction in an area around it, which could explain why Baldur's Gate is starting to have issues, where people are becoming more lawless. The guards are more corruptible, and everything is just not so good. And it's probably because of the fact that the shield was underground in the sewers for quite a long time.
Oh yeah, I mean, once that shield was uncovered by a different noble family, that's all part of the backdrop of Baldur's Gate in the campaign, stuff that your characters will never necessarily encounter. But once that shield was unearthed, and it started passing hands through the different noble families, either through intent or theft, that's definitely when Baldur's Gate took a turn for the worst. As you were saying, murders, crime, just the general seediness definitely escalated, unless you were living in the upper city, because you have enough money, influence, and protection against all of that.
Now the other thing too is that, and I forgot too, so this is another my bad moment. But I should have asked for. Well, actually, we did an identification on the shield, and it said there were no other abilities. But the devil inside was suggesting that there might be other abilities attached to this thing. So, what is right? The spell of identify, or the demon in the devil inside the shield trying to get to explore new possibilities?
Slight switching of the facts in your recollection right there. We did not use an identify on the shield, but we did use it on the glowing mace because you traded that for your new
That's
warhammer.
right. Okay. Then it was my bad again for not asking the archmage to go, hey, can you identify and see if there's any other abilities that we need to watch out for in the shield?
Right. I mean, she told you there's a pit fiend inside the shield that was tasked by Asmodeus to come to the material plane and just cause as much chaos as possible. And in so doing, this pit fiend took particular pleasure in corrupting mortals, gaining demigod status, essentially, in the process. This demon had worshippers. And now it's trapped inside of this artifact shield, so you can imagine what it was once capable of, and that it probably still has some tricks up its sleeve.
And here it is, a pit fiend being held back by a 5th level, hopefully soon to be 6th level paladin versus the will and might of a pit fiend trapped inside a shield.
Yeah, we're still delving more into the storyline there of the shield. We definitely got a good chunk of plot in this last game with it. And Silvira actually offered to take custody of the shield. Your characters seemed intent there for a while on giving her the shield because she was going to just find a portable hole at some point, throw it in there, and hopefully forget that it ever existed. Not the most responsible thing to do with it, if you ask me, but that was her solution. And your characters were down with that until you realized that she did not yet have a portable hole, and there was a potential of the shield spreading its influence throughout Candlekeep just as it had done through Baldur's Gate. And other justifications in your characters' mentalities basically led to Celestial maintaining possession of the shield, as Silvira provided a griffin escort for your characters to the tower of a wizard friend of hers named Traxigor, who lives on one of these islands here. I just kind of arbitrarily, yeah, it's this one right out here. And he actually lives above the island because he lived in a floating citadel, as the description said as you were approaching it. You were flying over the rocky islands when you encountered his floating tower. And you came into the tower, the griffins dropped you off at the top. Your characters immediately descended into the laboratory, and that's where you encountered the aforementioned otter, who,
Right.
Third time in the same game, we found 3 archmages in one game. This one is an otter, used to be human, and somebody threw a polymorph his way, and after enough time, this guy just decided, I kind of prefer this form. So he had a wish spell placed on him that made the form permanent. And that's why you have an otter archmage here who is going to be your ticket to get down to Avernus.
Oh, and I digress that from the very beginning of this adventure day, the horse puns and the horse jokes flowed freely throughout most of the beginning of the adventure. And I would like to humbly apologize on behalf of myself and the whole role playing team if we've um, completely made your minds explode from all the horse puns.
We apologize to all the equestrians out there who were offended by Evil Dawn and Buff's comments this past Tuesday. We hope we can put all this nonsense behind us.
I think it was almost a contest of sorts to see which one of us would crack first.
Oh my goodness. Well, then I don't know which of you won, but I cracked
But
first.
it's also the fact that we didn't even make any outer jokes. Now that was kind of a crying shame.
Yeah, we'd still be at Traxigor's tower when we ended the session, I think, if we had gone down that particular rabbit hole. As it was, we did not spend a lot of time with Traxigor. His whole thing was, I've been informed of your arrival. Silvira sent a sending spell my way, and I'm ready to cast the plane shift spell. I just have lost track of the material component. Won't you help me find it? Okay, we search, we find it, and we're good to go. The other noteworthy part of Traxagor's tower, Ricola, was Lulu, the Hollyphant, which is basically a miniature flying elephant, almost like a Dumbo, if you will, but golden colored and almost like with a golden fur covering its body. And it spoke in a very high-pitched female voice that I have not yet watched the stream yet, so I don't know if I'm happy with the voice I did, or if I'm just going to be outright embarrassed, because I spent most of the day leading up to this just like, man, what am I going to do for this? I don't usually do female voices, and if I do, they're like haughty, noble women or brave fighters. So I can kind of get into that headspace.
But trying to get into the headspace of a female celestial elephant, not much experience, huh?
And trying to keep it original too, because it was only when we got closer to this point that I realized my error in giving Slobberchops my best voice in the arsenal, because I knew Slobberchops was not going to be around the campaign for very long, and while this might not obviously be a female voice, I think it would be useful and could work in her fit, because, I mean, it's a cutesy voice and it's endearing, and it would just fit the character. And Lulu is going to be around with your characters for the next stage of the adventure, whereas Slobberchops, the Tressum, is smart and intelligent enough to realize you guys are talking about plane shifting to Avernus. All right, well, it's been fun, and thanks for all the treats. So long, and thanks for all the fish.
Yep. So then so go ahead.
I think we're on the same page there. We've got Lulu. We've discovered that she has some history battling devils in the Nine Hells. She seems to have a lot of tie-ins to the plot. She knows Zariel personally. She knows Silvira. She knows Traxagor here. She knows enough details almost about every facet of the plot, except the important details. A lot of her dialogue was, I remember this, but I forgot how it resolved. And I remember I did this and this, but I don't remember what happened next. And it was your character who immediately was just, okay, well, you need to come with us, because I'm sure revisiting a lot of these experiences will be the key to unlocking these memories.
And especially when she mentioned the fact that there's a magic sword and that there's a solution, and she just doesn't know where it is. It's like, all right, we need this resource with us.
Yeah. Now I just got to make sure I hammer down a voice for the character, because that's important, especially for NPCs who are going to be along with the group, and especially when I'm controlling two different NPCs, both of whom happen to be female. That's going to be a new challenge for yours truly in this campaign, trying to differentiate both of them. I mean, thankfully their skill set is sufficient enough that it'll be obvious when they're in combat, but roleplay moments I'll definitely be hard-pressed.
I think we should get red shirts for Reyna and the Hollyphant. Just in case.
Yeah, you never know. The way this group rolls their death saves, I mean, anything's possible. Your characters just might be as invincible as Grulock makes you out to be. Now here we have Elturel, and this is where your characters arrived on the map. Looks like we have a giant Celestial standing in the middle of the street as well, so let's get rid of him.
Those enlarged spells, they come in handy a lot.
Oh, look at that. There's a giant nadir over here as well. What are you guys doing out here?
I don't know.
How come you're so huge? Who cast the enlarge spell? Your characters arrived here, and you discovered... I think I have quick access to it here. Yep, right. Oh, isn't that convenient? The picture. Come on. Loading. There we go. That is where your characters arrive when you come into Elturel. Elturel is sitting on top of that giant rock that is attached by chains, dragging it down into the river Styx. That dark glowing orb in the sky above it crackling with blue lightning that is occasionally striking the city streets and demolishing buildings and pavement alike, was the sun, the companion, the holy light that bathed Elturel for the past 50 years. That's another part of the backstory that a lot of people may have forgotten, was there was a vampire lord that had occupied Elturel and was taking over the city, and Thavius Krieg at that point was a devout follower of Torm, and he beseeched Torm countless times, please help me with this vampire, please help me with this vampire, what am I supposed to do? And finally he gave up beseeching Torm, and he beseeched anybody who will help me. And that's how Zariel got entangled with Thavius Krieg, and the deal was made. I will place this companion, this holy light above Elturel, and it will eradicate the vampires, and you will be hailed as a savior, and everything will be great for 50 years until the deal is broken, and now we see the results of that on this picture right here.
And that's the cool thing about a lot of the Forgotten Realms, is that there is so much flavor and so much story into it that there's a lot of things that our characters will never discover, but when we do discover things like the fact that that was a miniature sun to keep the vampires away and everything,
Right.
and how the greed and the good intentions of the keeper of this place just turned bad.
Yeah, they definitely give these characters that you literally, I mean, Thavius Krieg, what was the encounter? 6 ticks of the first initiative round? So we spent maybe 4.5 seconds with interacting with this character in total, but you see this backstory that he has and all of the ways that he's influenced the plot that we're playing here. And we don't necessarily get the chance to see all of that in-game when we're hunting down devils and trying to stop plots to drag Baldur's Gate down into hell. We're just like, there's the bad guy, get him, stab, 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 dead, 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 and then, alright, so what did all that mean? And a lot of times, especially with these modules, we only get the answers from an out-of-game perspective, unless your characters are deeply seeking all of these answers in-game. And we see here on the next map here, this is actually our final map of the session, where your characters are now marching through the ruined streets of Elturel, heading for the High Hall, where Rhea is leading you, hoping to find just some answers, some sense of organization, if there's any to be found left in this city, if there's any chance of saving this city. That's the whole reason we're here. And here on this street, actually I'm zooming the wrong way, right here, we have a mother and her twin toddler sons, and she was encountered by these 3 bearded devils who had it out for her. They've been slaying innocents all day and just having a field day ever since Elturel was drawn down to this layer of hell. So they were very cocky and arrogant as your characters approached into the street, and that ended very quickly for all of them, because your characters finally gained the satisfaction of being able to slay devils on their home plane and actually kill them.
Yeah, I mean, they were basically, it's like, all right, everybody we've seen so far, we were able to pick off very easy. They were town folk. They didn't have weapons and magic and things like that. And all of a sudden, it's like, here's a party of adventurers that outnumbers them 2 to 1. And finally, my dice go at half speed, where I actually get to hit 2 of them.
Yeah, we had some good flank advantage, and just the way that these bearded devils cockily gave up their first round of initiative. Because they had, I think the mom got to go first, which worked out perfect. She was able to get 30 feet away. Your character told her, hurry, hurry, get behind us. So she did a dash, brought her 2 children down here to safety, and then the devils went right after her. I mean, they had the advantage to at least get in and start laying some damage on your party. Instead, they just kind of saunter up, just like, yeah, what's up? What's up? You guys are in our house now. Just, yeah, come on. And they gave up their first round. They just walked forward 30 feet, and that was it. And they regretted it and for the rest of their lives, which was about 12 seconds.
Yep. And then, you know, the strategy, the fact that we did have to get it pointed out a little bit that the lighted area is a path, but there were sidewalks on either side, allowing us the opportunity to create flanks. And once we utilized a bunch of those tactics, combat became pretty easy.
Yes, indeed. I am. I'm both happy and a little regretful with the maps that we have to use here for this city because a lot of these encounters are designed in the module as theater of the mind. But for myself, I always like to have a grid and some kind of map if I'm able to design it ahead of time. And these encounters I knew were coming up, so I had these maps designed. But the darkness of them is a little bit too much, I think, and I'm unable to unfortunately do anything about that. These are not dynamic lighting lines like your characters are used to seeing. That I'm responsible for tracing them and controlling where your characters can and cannot see. This is just the map that I had, the best map that I had to represent a ruined city, and then I threw in elements of a different map pack. I mean, these little rocks from hell and what have you obviously didn't come standard on this map, and I'm happy with it. I think it represents it very well, but I think it's also a very confusing map too.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, pros and cons to each of them. Pros to theater of the mind is the fact that you don't need to use the maps. You don't have to worry about a lot of the dynamics. But some of the cons to it is trying to find out exactly where everybody is. Who's caught up in that fireball?
Yeah.
Who's going to be, who's flanking who? How is the movement going to be there? How is attack of opportunity going to work? There's a lot of questions that you really can't answer with theater of the mind that you can do pretty easily when it comes to maps.
Yeah, and I don't know how we used to do it back in 3E. I feel like in '99, 2000, when we were in the thick of 3E and the first expansions to it, everything we were doing was theater of the mind. And
What?
I don't know. I mean, we're definitely 20 years older than we were back then. But our minds, I don't know if we had that switch on or what have you, but it seemed like we all were in that same imaginary map back then, where Justin's character would move away, and then you would say, "Well, aren't you standing next to so and so?" And that's going to provoke this, and we're all like, "Oh yeah, you are standing over there." So we all seemed to used to have that. Just over time, as we've become more used to the process of having actual maps with grids and seeing all of it represented as beautifully as Roll20 can display it, I think going back to Theater of the Mind is like 3 times as difficult now. When we tried it with the Fantasy Flight Star Wars edition, it would come up to somebody's turn and they'd just be like, where am I? What's going on? Who am I?
Well, what's also makes it kind of interesting though is even pre-COVID, well before COVID, we started playing on Roll20 so that we wouldn't even have to leave our houses anymore. But we used to
Oh yeah.
gather, at one person's house, bring all the books, bring, probably why my back is screwed up now is because of all those books
I'll second
of
that.
traveling. And then the graph paper and the whole kit and caboodle.
Oh yeah, that's exactly. I mean, that is a subject that will always stay very much in the forefront of my mind. I believe is, and it even shows it in my Roll20 profile. I think it's July of 2015 is when, or 2016 when I joined the Roll20, and it was literally that day as I logged in, created my account, and saw the things that were possible with it that my mind was blown. I was like, how have we not been doing this for years? Yes, most of us live in the same city, but for me in particular, you know how much I embrace detail in these games. I mean, how many Dwarven Forge sets did I have? 7,
Right.
8? How many fish tackle boxes of miniatures did I have? Did you have that we were lugging each week? How many 50-pound duffel bags and backpacks of books and dice and paper and pencils were we lugging on a weekly basis back and forth? And then for me, at the time, I was living in a place that didn't have assigned parking, so I'm getting back to my house at 2 a.m., and I've got 3 trips back and forth to my apartment, and sometimes those trips, because it's 2 a.m. and every parking spot is filled, I'm parking like all the way on the other side of the apartment complex. So I've got a 250-yard trip ahead of me 3 times upstairs with all of these books, miniatures, Dwarven Forge maps, laptop computer, etc., etc. Back is going out at the age of 30, and I'm just, long story short, and that's impossible now because I've rambled on so much.
Too late.
Too late, as I tend to do. When I discovered Roll20, it was just, man, do I want to go down this rabbit hole? Because I've invested so much time and money in these physical props that we have live at the tabletop. Do I want to then go down financially that route of doing this in Roll20? Because now I need to start buying token packs, map packs. Once the animated effects came out, diving down into that. Music, all these extra additions. But in the end, it didn't take very long at all. The pros definitely outweighed the cons for Roll20, and we made the transition very quickly thereafter. Unfortunately, we lost a couple of our local players, but the plus side of Roll20 is that we gained some of the players who had moved away from Vegas.
Right. And so, and I'm looking forward to, and again, spoiler alert, but I'm looking forward to John coming back, because John always makes entertaining characters, thoughtful characters. And as I say this now, I mean, I know that he's going to be playing a goblin. So it's going to be one of those things where it's like whoever makes a smart goblin.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that moment when he brings in his character, which, if I'm understanding the calendar correctly, we're going to have John returning the week after Kyla. So we're gonna reinforce our group size almost by an extra third, just there in a 2-week span. But we're gonna have to ride through the rest of June here with just the party as we have it.
So,
well, I'm not really sure that we have much more to discuss about the game itself. I feel like we kind of wrapped that up, and then we got off on a tangent about why we started playing on Roll20 as opposed to playing in person. Which,
right. And we hit our 1 hour mark right now. So,
oh yeah, definitely. So this is definitely a good time for me to send it to the intermission screen here. This will conclude the first segment of RPU OOC for this week, wherein we recap the adventure from this past Tuesday. And we're going to send it to the intermission here, and when we return, we will have another segment of the Enemir Historia. So don't go anywhere, and we will catch you back in about 5 minutes.